In February of 1998, I gave birth to a baby girl who wasn't supposed to arrive until the end of May. She was born at 24 weeks and weighed a pound 13 ounces, and she was 13.1 inches long. Babies born this early can have a ton of problems. Their lungs aren't developed, GI system isn't ready to eat, heart issues can develop, but really by the grace of God, she turned a corner probably in early April, began to eat on her own, and came home May 19th, a week before her due date, at 5 pounds. So, and we were really blessed that she did not come home with a feeding tube or with any supplemental oxygen, nor did she come home with a monitor, which really freaked me out. I slept a lot of nights with her bassinet by the bed, and I would have my hand laying in the bassinet with my hand on her back to make sure I could still feel the rise and fall of her chest. I had been raised in church, but during the time that I was in college, I had stepped away from the Lord, had my own plans, had things I wanted to do, places I wanted to go, where I wanted to live, and it was not in Cincinnati, Ohio. But the Lord used that time until about 3.5 years after she was born to work on my heart, and I finally started going back to church. And then the next year my husband and I were married in 2002. In May of 2003, or March of 2003, we discovered we were pregnant again, and we're super excited. I was a little scared. Yeah, I was a lot scared. The doctors watched me really, really closely, but sadly around 20 weeks, I began to have some contractions. They put me on modified bed rest and eventually sent me home from the hospital. I hung out for about 4 weeks, and right around 24 weeks, I started to go into active labor. And so I spent the next week and 3 days doing everything I could, which was basically lay there and let them pump me full of medicines to try to keep my labor from progressing. But when she was 25 weeks and 3 days, the doctors determined that it was time to go ahead and take the baby and go from there. So our younger daughter was born at 25 weeks, 3 days. She weighed a pound and 12 ounces, and she was 12 inches long. So as easy of a time in the NICU, or the neonatal intensive care unit, as my older daughter had, my younger daughter had every problem that they talked to us about for the most part. She had a surgery on the heart valve when she was 28 weeks gestation, and she was still under 3 pounds at that point. And then we encountered airway issues. The trachea had been damaged from the amount of time she spent on the ventilator from what you call traumatic intubations, where they have to put the tube back down quickly. And so her airway was really inflamed. It was really scarred up and really narrow. And so around Thanksgiving of 2003, she was handed back over to the OR team to get a tracheostomy. And so the last 16 years have been really hard. During this time, she's had over 100 procedures, and 5 of them have been open airway procedures. Some of them were as simple as go in and laser this or laser that. But we've really tried to make her life as a family of 4 as good as we possibly can, and give her as many opportunities as she could possibly have, keeping in mind with a trach, sand and water aren't really recommended because of the risk of aspiration. During those 16 years, her trach was out for about 10 years, and it was really, really hard. She still had a lot of airway issues, and we just couldn't seem to ever find the right fix. So about 3 years ago, she had a big surgery, And bless her heart, at 13 years old, almost 14, when her ENT sat down with her to talk, he gave her two options. One was to be intubated or with the tube down for an extended period of time. The goal would be 10 to 14 days. Could be longer depending on swelling and how she healed. The other option was to do a trach with a stent to keep the airway open, and she would be out of the hospital much sooner. She would recover much faster. And so at 13 years old, she made a very grown-up decision to move forward getting another trach. I will say that during these years, back from when Brianna was born, I wasn't, my heart wasn't with the Lord. And you would think that when Brianna was a baby and had her issues, that I would have been right back in church and trying to get my life together and get my life right with the Lord, but it took about 3.5 years. And so when Brianna was about 3.5 years, I started going back to church and really felt at peace despite all of the chaos that was going on around us. So about a year ago, Hannah was approved for a wish. And we had talked about various things, and keeping in mind some of the amusement parks weren't great ideas for various reasons. And so our wish team came out, and we were sitting in the living room, and they're asking her what she likes, what she doesn't like to do and watch, and who her favorite characters and movies are, and so forth. And so we had kind of talked, and I had shown her how to use Pinterest and look at some of the other wishes that had been granted. And so the wish volunteer looks at her and says, "So Hannah, if you could have or do anything in the world, what would it be?" And without hesitation, she says she wants to go to Paris. She had never really mentioned this to me. I was floored. I looked at my husband and my older daughter to see if she had given anyone any idea that this is what she wanted, and I could tell by the look of astonishment on their faces that they hadn't a clue either. And so the two volunteers, the two gals here, they were like, okay. And then they said, if we can't do the first wish, what would be your second wish? And she said she wanted to go RVing out west, which was what I thought her first wish was going to be. So I contacted her team right away and said, this is still in process, but if she is approved to go to Paris, are you okay with it? I will make sure I have equipment and supplies lined up while we're there. I will know where the nearest pediatric hospital is. I will get names of docs over there if we need something. And her team was perfectly fine with her going. And what her ENT told me was that when all of this started to come forth, was that when she had had a procedure done, I guess it had been a few months before that meeting, that we had already met an amazing doctor. He was a visiting doctor, and he had gone into the OR with them, and he was visiting from the equivalent of a Paris Children's Hospital. So that was a total God moment. That couldn't have been more perfectly orchestrated. So in August of 2019, on August 1st, the day before her 16th birthday, we had an amazing reveal party at my church, and we had a ton of people there, and we never told her what wish was approved. We just said we have to get passports because we can't process the remainder of an international wish until we have passports and they have copies. So we kept the whole thing quiet from her. We didn't really talk about it. I was doing some things kind of on the sly, ordering different things that we would need, looking for equipment companies and so forth. to go to Paris. And then on August 14th, we left Cincinnati and had a straight flight over to Paris and began our 7-day wish journey, which was incredible beyond belief. It helped me to understand a little better too what she could do, what her limitations were, and that even with assistance, and that's okay, that with assistance we could still pull something like this off, and that we were not going to allow being dependent on a trach to dictate what her life would mean. So that was our big thing last year, and so it still feels like a dream. But so let me step back a few more years again. In 2010, I started to have some health issues. I was having a lot of trouble with my neck. I was having these horrific headaches at the back of the skull. Tylenol wouldn't touch it. I didn't know what to do. I was having neck pain. At this point, I was also strongly suspecting that I had a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or ADS, the hypermobility type. My diagnosis was based on this 9-point Batten scale, and you can do crazy stuff like pulling your thumb to your forearm, bending at the waist and being able to place your palms flat on the ground, and some other hypermobility things. And I was also strongly suspicious that Hannah had it, and that my older daughter had it as well. Hannah never healed right from surgeries. Your airway and your lungs are connective tissue. So there were things that were really starting to make sense. And it took about 2 years until I found a doctor that I felt comfortable with. I had been diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome at that point, and I had a fusion done. And shortly after that fusion in my neck, I started having other issues from it. I was getting a lot of numbness and tingling down my arms again, and over the next several years, more issues developed, from choking and aspirating, or, you know, if you've ever sucked something down the wrong way, that's aspiration. I was tripping, I was falling, and there aren't a lot of doctors that have the knowledge and expertise to be able to do what I was going to need done. And I began to look for surgeons out of state. And I eventually, landed with a surgeon up in New York. He's a brilliant man, and he was a godsend, and I am so very, very thankful that I was able to get up there to see him. I had 2 different surgeries with him, starting in 2014 and through 2015. During all of this time of kind of like seeking out answers, we were also very involved with our children's hospital. We're there enough. We call ourselves frequent flyers, but not the kind like through Delta where you get points to go to cool places. The hospital is our second home. I've done a lot of speaking engagements for them. We've done just a lot of different campaigns and sharing our story with Hannah, and honoring the doctors and nurses and the staff overall for all of the care they have given her and the thinking like outside the box. So in 2015, we decided, my surgeon and I, and you know, my husband and I, we prayed on it, and we decided that it was time to move forward with this surgery. And what it entailed was a rather lengthy incision from about the middle of the back of my head to just down below the shoulder line. And there were 2 main things that we were going to look at. One was craniocervical instability, or CCI, and that's basically if you imagine a pumpkin on a toothpick trying to balance, that's kind of what it felt like, because the ligaments in my neck weren't doing the job they were supposed to do because they were weak. And so the other issue was called Chiari, where the cerebellar tonsils, or the hindbrain, herniate through the opening in the back of the skull and can impact significantly if they hit the brainstem, which mine were, or if it causes a block of your spinal fluid flow, which it did. So a week before this surgery, we were scheduled to go to Washington, D.C. Our children's hospital was doing a presentation there on why they needed some fast tracking for some testing on a specific drug that they wanted to use in a very specific population. And what they wanted from us was our experience in using this drug on preterm babies. And so while we're out there, we were walking around, finding dinner, doing a little bit of sightseeing in DC, and I tripped and could not maintain my balance, and I fell. And I heard my ankle pop, so I knew I had torn something, and an ankle that had already been fixed years before. And I had road rash all up my arm. So that happened, I believe, on a Sunday. That Monday was Labor Day, and that Tuesday was when we were scheduled to go on Capitol Hill to present this case of needing this fast track testing. And I muddled through a presentation discussing our use with this stuff and what it had meant to our family, and the need for there to be some quicker testing available as they find new treatments for rare disease. And then the very next week, my husband and I left on a Tuesday and arrived in New York on Wednesday for some testing, and then that Thursday I had brain and spine surgery. It was a 10-hour procedure. My kids were here with family and some friends, and we were in New York alone, didn't know anyone there, and my surgery was a late afternoon procedure, and we didn't get done until I think it was midnight or 12:30, so it was, I think, 8 to 10 hours at this point. I can't remember, but that was a really hard recovery. I dealt with emotions and stuff that I didn't realize I would have to deal with after this. And part of it is that a lot of people with the conditions that I have, they can be very sick and bedridden. And so here I was in this kind of middle of the road where I wasn't that sick, but I wasn't better. And so I've done a lot of praying and trying to figure out where I wanted to go, where I wanted to land, but I wanted it to be in tune with where the Lord wanted me. And so I started a job back in 2002 in pharmaceutical research. I had worked with data previously to that, but this was what I would call a step on the ladder to my dream job. I was working with data from pharmaceutical research studies, and I loved it. Loved it with every fiber of my being. That was what I wanted to do. But then I had actually had to take a medical leave beginning in 2014 because of all the tripping and falling and heart rate issues and just a lot of stuff. And they held my job for me for 18 months, and I was very honored that they did that, because they didn't have to. They only really, because of FMLA, they only had to hold it for 3. But when they wanted me to come back, I was still recovering from that big brain and spine surgery. So in 2015, I lost a job that I loved. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. And so I just kind of began researching how data analytics plays into business today, and kept coming across words like big data, machine learning, and analytics, and so forth. And I continued to search because I didn't feel like the Lord had led me right away to something that He wanted me to be at. He was just leading me on this path. And between 2015 and now, social media management really became a thing, and social media marketing became a thing. And what I found, though, was that there aren't a lot of people that are uber focused on the data and building a strategy versus shooting at a random target without rhyme or reason, without structure. And so my passion has led me here, creating data guided decisions. I can use my passion for data and analytics and finding that needle in the haystack to help you move your business forward. I can combine that, but I'm working with people and I'm helping them to achieve their dreams, their goals, and hopefully through the things that have gone on in my life, I want other people to see that they can overcome. That for me, Jesus is the leader in my life, and we've had a lot of hard roads, but I've really tried to never lose the lesson in anything that has gone on. Because if you focus on the negative of a situation long enough, it will drown you. And I know this. And I'm not saying that every day you have to be Susie Sunshine, and that it's good to take a look at something and the negative and understand it, but we have to be able to turn that into something better. And that's what I've tried to teach my children, that it might be hard right now, and don't fall prey to the line that God will only give you what you can handle, because I'm here to tell you that is a lie. Because Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's not I can only do this, or it's strictly if the Lord means it for your life and wants that for your life, He will help you get there. And I don't want people to think that they're ever restricted by this line of He will only give you what you can handle. Because if He only gave me what I could handle, I wouldn't be here now. And so I hope that this journey of over 20 years helps someone understand that you can recreate yourself, you can redirect your passion, and you can overcome.